Hello and welcome to Intelliteach webinar that's going to talk a little bit about the current industry performance, trends that we're seeing, and some solutions to dealing with the difficulties that we're facing brought on by the current pandemic. With me today is Virgil Daituko, Senior Vice President of Application Development. Among other things, he oversees the Iris Business Intelligence tool that we use to create some of the industry data. My name is Mike Ferdman. I'm Chief Operating Officer, Managed Financial Services Division. And we're going to talk a little bit today, but first a little bit about Intelliteach. If you're not familiar with us, for about 30 years now, Intelliteach has been working with law firms, offering them services in accounts receivable management, billing, IT services, service desk, and we have been here before. We have been working with firms for a while. We have seen some economic downturns in the past. And while this one's different, we have learned some lessons along the way about how to handle these situations. So hopefully we're going to be able to make some of that useful for you today. The purpose of this review, as I mentioned, we're all facing kind of a unique challenge. Companies and law firms are moving to partially or entirely remote workforce. Businesses and courts are closed. Your clients are facing layoffs, furloughs, financial struggles, and some law firms are as well. We started to really notice an impact to the industry in March. Around March 17th, our data started to indicate that hours worked and hours billed started to take a dip. We attributed that to everybody moving to work from home where applicable. But polling in the industry found that law firms were concerned about the possibility of collecting on payments. Industry experts were warning that collections would be a struggle. And everyone was concerned about health and welfare more than business, but there was kind of a concern in the market about what does the future hold. Before we get into the data, I'm going to let Virgil explain a little bit about where the data comes from.
Thank you, Mike, and hello, everyone. So as indicated in this slide, Iris is our business intelligence application. And by utilizing Iris, we were able to uncover trends on key performance indicators from data of law firms that included time entry, billing, and collection data.
Just a little bit more about the data. So this may or may not be exactly the same figures and statistics that you're going to see from other sources. The unique thing about Iris is that this is not self-reported data, that there is no opportunity for firms to manipulate or manicure the data. So this is the raw data. We measure it the same way for every firm in our database. I'm not aware of us being different from anyone else, but often is the case that the raw data tells the true story. So about the data, we have kind of two groups of measurements to discuss today. One is a year-to-date measurement. So that would be the first 4 months of 2019 versus the first 4 months of performance of 2020. And then we have separately to the right the month-to-date. So that would just be April 2019 performance versus April 2020 performance. Just to get started, hours worked. And Virgil, hours worked, you calculate that that's just time entry, correct?
Yes, so hours worked is billable hours worked.
So the first 4 months of the year, as we were watching this starting in March, we started to see a degradation, but up until that point, firms had been ahead of last year. By the end of April, we started to see it kind of leveling off. But then as you move to the column to the right to see the real impact, April versus April, hours worked fell off quite substantially. Now, hours billed differs from hours worked. I'll let Virgil again explain.
Yeah, so hours billed is just the billed hours worked. Billed hours for the year-to-date 2020 versus 2019 on the year-to-date column, and the same way we measured it March 2020 versus, I'm sorry, April 2020 versus April 2019,
So,
percent difference.
so here again, we see a trend where for the year we were ahead, and we saw hours billed increasing, but in April you see the trend slackening off. So April, kind of a turning point. Firms had been at least ahead of last year in many cases through March, but maybe not up to budget through the end of March. But now we're seeing that trend is turning. So the next one, fees billed, which is where rate plays. So you take the hours worked, but this is the actual rate. So make sure that we're clear on that. I'll let Virgil explain how that's
Okay,
calculated.
so this is just the dollar amount of the fees billed for the period measured year to date, and month to date, year over year, and month over month. So it's the dollar amount of fees billed.
And it's actually increased over at a greater pace over hours billed, because we have seen a rate increase in this industry in 2020. That while it's holding for the most part, you can see year to date 9.3% ahead, but in April that pace is not holding. And we do expect from early preliminary data in May, we are seeing these trends continue to play out. So we'll have more data at the end of May when we collect that. But the mid-month indicators are saying that these trends are going to continue into May. The next one, fees collected, which is I guess one of the more important ones here from a collections tactics angle. Again, for the year had been up, through March. Now, from March 17th, we started to see that really, slow down. And then on a month-to-date basis, obviously, April over April was not a good month. This is really where we're seeing the concerning trends. Hours worked and fees collected both took a very significant hit. We talked about the hours billed, and here's where we're seeing on the next line on fee WIP, that's work in process. That's the amount of inventory you have in work in process. Because the work hours slowed, but hours continue to get billed, you're seeing that the WIP is less. So less inventory in there to carry. But the opposite is happening on fee AR, the next two lines. Because you're not collecting at the same pace, we're seeing fee AR build or increase. So you're carrying more inventory. And again, looking at the May trends, we're seeing that absolutely is the trend line that we're going to see continuing for at least a little while. And then related to those other figures, days of unbilled, that's the measure. Well, Virgil, if you would please explain how we calculate.
So days of unbilled is the calculation is your unbilled work in progress. I'm sorry, your unbilled time divided by your average daily work amount. So that's your days of unbilled. Days of AR is your fee AR divided by your average daily fee billing. And average daily fee billing, we just take your fee billing in the last year and divide it by 365.
And I'm going to pause on talking about the data for just a second. I have kept everyone on mute to make it easier for everyone to hear. But you should be able to click on a question mark in your panel, pose questions at any time during this webinar, and we'll see those, and we'll take pauses in between certain sections and answer those questions. So we do encourage you, if you have questions as we review something, please go ahead and post that question from the webinar control panel, and we'll get to those shortly. So days of unbilled, as we talked about, because billing was up fee billing was up, but work product was down. The inventory is shrinking. We're seeing that you're carrying, as a percentage of total inventory of WIP, we're seeing that go down. The same calculation is used on days of AR, and because you're not collecting it quite at the same pace that you were, there's more inventory across the industry in AR that's accumulating. So while 5 days across the industry average of over 100 firms, we see some pretty wild swings from firms that are still on par to firms that are 10, 12, days increase in days of AR. And then, as we talked about on the first slide, we did see the rate increase of about 3.1% across the industry. Larger firms had a bigger impact and a greater increase than some of the smaller firms on rate. In fact, surprised to find out as we look at these statistics by size, it seems very polarized in that larger law firms, the AmLaw 50 and up, seem to perform better in many calculations. The next best group, oddly enough, we're the smallest size group that we measure. That's the bottom of the AmLaw 200. Those two groups, but the group of AmLaw 50 to through 150 or so, which typically is about 100 to 350 attorney-sized law firms on average, we're kind of a mixed bag in the middle. So we do have the ability to look at a number of statistics by size or by area of country of things of that nature. So wanted to touch on billing rate, but these are all averages across the industry. We can pause and talk about the data that was just presented before we move into the next section. Virgil, if you want to read off any questions we might have, we can.
Yeah, so there's a question here. Is there any way for me to see how my firm is comparing to similar firms?
Well, so that would be a question for Virgil, because he can work with firms on getting these exact measures and obviously more.
Yeah, so we can work with you to get your data and run it through our data warehouse and perform the same analytics as which results to the KPI that you've seen in here. And if you're interested, we will have somebody contact you and work you on the process on how that's done.
All right. Any other questions? Not seeing anything else at this time. All right, so we'll move into some tactics. So maintaining normal. What's not on this slide is advice that you should keep collecting. We have seen in other downturns where the natural reaction is try to be considerate of your clients and be good partners with your clients and understand that they're having some financial difficulties. So be lenient and let that client know that you're willing to work with them and perhaps be patient on payment. What we have discovered is, though, it's perhaps a different world than it was in 2008, 2009, and we see a lot of opportunistic behavior out there where companies, your clients that are not legitimately impacted are claiming that they are. So our experience is keep collecting. You will find out. Be deferential. Be respectful, but ask the question, and that leads to the first bullet point we have is that as you're talking to your clients, you need to track all the client claims of inability to pay where they say it's due to the pandemic, and that would be a little different than inability to pay about for other types of reasons, and that is because you want to verify if that claim is valid. So look at their payment history. If they haven't paid you in 4 months, well, that's probably an indicator that it's not COVID-19 related. Look at the business that these companies might be in. What industry do they serve? You can find a lot about a client by looking at perhaps their website or other public records to try to figure out if that claim is a valid one. As you manage those claims, you want to come up with a unique collection strategy. There is no one size fits all of how you want to manage through these things because cases will be different. So your tactics might be to include, short payments, 2 or 3 months, something like that, to break it up into smaller payments, or extending them another 30 days of terms, or getting in the cost only, so that you're recovering your out of pocket, and that keeps some cash flow going for your firm. But also, in the case where there's a serious impact to these organizations, consider settlements. What you might be able to get now, and I'm never an advocate of settling, but what you may be able to get now may be the only chance to get anything. Their situation may be much worsened in 30 to 60 days, as the economy seems to still be impacted by this, even as certain parts of the country are reopening. So that's a judgment call you have to be open to: is can you get something today, and is that the best outcome that you can hope for? The next piece of advice is you have to contact all clients, and that includes ones that you normally don't. All of your do not contact lists, all of your contingent, all of the pay upon closing, pay upon completion, all of those things, and not necessarily a collection call, but certainly a health check call to make sure that those organizations, those businesses are still viable, they're still stable. We're finding that clients are willing to be very forthcoming about the situation they're in and answer questions, but we've also seen situations where reaching out to clients, you're finding out there's no one on the other end of the line. Businesses have closed. Some may not reopen. You should understand and know that if you continue to work on a matter, is there any chance of getting paid? And if an organization is truly in trouble, the only way you're going to find that out is um, to ask the question, to reach out and ask that question. So contact all your clients and know what's happening with them. And the last one we're going to touch on is to really control risk at the client intake, perhaps at a level that firms haven't done in the past. So right now, when there's financial difficulties in the marketplace, you should understand your client's ability to pay before work begins. So that's a departure for a lot of firms that don't typically concern themselves about anything other than material balances. So in the event that you come across clients that do present themselves as high risk, what can you do about that? Well, there might be special payment terms. You might take a retainer. Uh, you might control the exposure by limiting how much WIP and AR that they're allowed to accumulate before you get a payment from them. And that's all to protect yourself from bad debt should a client fail. And there are a number of ways that you can get information on a client's ability to pay, and that can come from LexisNexis or Accurant or a number of others. But those are all good tools that you can start to employ as you take on new clients to understand the financial position that they're under. And again, what business are they in, and what are their clients or customer base like, so that you can kind of have an idea what risk are you bringing in of getting paid. And again, since we're at the end here, I want to open it back up, and questions about the material that we presented today, go ahead and put those questions in the question box, and we'll get to them.
Mike, I do want to add that using the BI, if you have a BI tool, one of the things that that it should provide you is action items based on trends. And an example for that is looking at the historical payment behavior of your clients, and based on that, look at should they have paid in the previous month, and if not, look at the industry and see if this is the type of industry that was affected by the pandemic. That's why they missed a payment, and just make sure those are addressed sooner than later.
Good point. All right, not seeing much in the way of questions coming up. I will tell you that after this webinar, we will distribute the material, so you can I'm sorry, here's one. Um, the question was, can you conduct further webinars or provide the KPI data at the end of the future month? Oh, so I'm glad somebody asked that question. So yes, we intend to do this as a series, and at the end of each month, while we monitor things all through the month, adjustments and things happen through the month. That month end data is really the data that you need to go by. So not only will we publish that data, but we'll also have subsequent webinars like this to talk about the trends and try to give you as much of an early warning as what the trends are, and are they shifting through these webinars and through the information that we publish. So the next question, Virgil. So we are seeing much more decline than what you are shown. Uh, I understand your data is a cross section of many firms. So uh, well, so that's a question that depending on, and I might have touched on this a little bit. What Virgil's group can do is look at by geographic area. How do you because some parts of the country are hit harder than others. Some, as I mentioned, it's a function of firm size. Uh, you know, if you have a specialty, that could be part of that. So we can sometimes able to work with you to compare your performance data to other firms in our database that are like yours in those areas, geographically, by practice group or by size, to give you a little more of an indicator. Are you experiencing the same thing as the industry? We'll try to publish some of this information by size as well. But a lot of times it brings up questions. We'd like to go through that data with you. Um, so Virgil, you want to take the next one about the COVID tracking?
Yeah, so it's important that Mike mentioned it too. One of the things that you want to do is different time and billing systems have the ability to track uh, you know UDF or payment plans. So this is there's supposed there should have some information there or fields available to your time and billing system where you can track, for instance, a delay of payment due to COVID-19. And once the data is in your system, then it's easier to see trends on how those specific clients perform. So another thing that to add to Mike's point about answering the decline, the good news is we track our collections also by week, and so far May has been better than April. Just on the first 2 weeks in May, on what we're seeing, it's better than May. So hopefully, for everyone's sake, that the trend stays that way.
And that's the interesting thing. So as parts of the country reopen, June might be a very different picture than what we're seeing today. That's the hope. Did we miss anything? All right. Well, as I started to say, there will be materials distributed, and I think you can actually you will have some contact information if you had questions about specifics about how does this apply to your firm or anything like that. Feel free to reach out to Virgil and I. I think our contact information will definitely be a part of that information, so that we're happy to be part of the conversation as this applies to your firm specifically. I have another question. What does the oh, hold on a second. It just moved.
What does the service you provide look like? We don't want any of our clients feeling like they're getting collection calls.
So okay, if I understand the question, no. So this is not. Well, that's more to do with our approach, but it's account resolution. It's not collections. Law firms aren't interested in collections per se. They're looking to get issues resolved, and if something has led to a non-payment, you have to figure out why and resolve those things. All right. Well, I think, oh, well, let's pause. We've got some more stuff coming in. Let's see. For firms seeing success with collections, have you heard of this? If this is from older AR, newer AR over the past couple of months. So, wow, AR trend. So we are seeing, AR over 60 growing at a slightly more rapid pace than AR under 60. So, um, my answer to that would be yes. The current stuff seems to be a little bit more collectible. Things are, because of the days of AR moving out, things are starting to build. That may just be, you know, the the clients that you have that are the hardest hit, um, not being able to pay, and everyone else is paying. So hopefully you have maybe some of that might move through as a bubble that need to be resolved as they get older. But yeah, as Virgil was just saying, preliminary reports on May collections, which we're watching, um, uh, you know, the indicators on that he felt looked good. So hopefully that means um, payment success will continue. It's good that someone's having success on that. Congrats. All right. Well, I think we're right at about 12:30. I do thank everyone for participating. We're going to announce another one of these as soon as we have some data to share, and the information from this one will be shared with everyone. That's all we have for today. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.